Okay, as you can see, I've got everything glued down, ready to go. I went ahead and glued the roof on. I glued an extra fish just because I wanted it. All of the ground cover is dry. Now, to dam off the ends, to keep the liquid from flowing out onto the table, I'm just going to cut a couple of strips of this pink foam. Since we've already used pink foam for the base, I assume you're going to have probably some left over anyway. I'm going to cut 3 strips, and this one is just a little bit longer than the width of the front that we've got here. And I'm going to try to cut it as evenly straight up and down as possible, but we're going to hold it up in place with a book or something, so it's probably not critical that it's perfectly straight up and down, because this is just going to kind of form a dam across here. Now the 3 strips we got are one's going to set across the front, one's going to go across this side, and one's going to go across this side. And you notice it's not really very tall. Like I said, we've only got a 1/4 inch of material going. The next thing we're going to do is take some 2-inch wide packaging tape. It doesn't really matter what kind, and we're going to cover the insides with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay this back, and I'm going to take a nice long strip of tape, and I want to kind of line the bottom of it up. So I'm going to line the bottom of it up with the bottom of this, and extra tape is going to stick over the top. Push it down really well, and this tape is going to go up against the side like this. We're going to do the same deal with it, only I think this side what I'm going to do is put it right against the corner edge here, so that this edge is like just perfectly straight with this edge here. And this back side will flip over, and this one is going to butt right against there like that. And then the other side, I'm going to make this end the side that matches up perfectly here. Now, to keep this liquid from pouring out down the crack here, we need to seal it with something. I'm going to use 5-minute epoxy for this. Now, when we go to seal this piece against the front edge, we got to hold this in place nice and tight somehow. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a book back here and kind of wedge it against the wall, and then I'm going to shove this whole thing up against here so it's kind of a nice tight. Next, I'm going to squeeze out some epoxy to mix up. Now, it's kind of hard to tell exactly how much epoxy you should squeeze out, but we'll give it a shot here. Okay, I think I've had this epoxy a while because, wow, that's hard to get out. You really got to push. It's just like really thick for some reason. Yeah, look at that side over there. I think I've got kind of an older batch, because that side just is not wanting to come out of the tube. Come on, you. Next, you're just going to take a popsicle stick and kind of mix this up. If we were doing this waves on top of the water, I'd say to kind of not mix too much air into it, but it really doesn't matter for sealing around the outside edges like this. Okay, I'm going to start on the corner here. What you want to do is, this is pushed against there really well, and I've got the epoxy on here. What I'm going to do is just kind of put along here and push it down into the crack like that. Just kind of push it against there and fill that crack. I'm going to scoop up a little bit more of it, and I'm just going to go along the edge, and I'm just going to kind of push it down into the crack. Now, I'm not too worried, be sure to get it up on the side. If you get it up, onto the side a little bit, that's okay. You want a nice seal. Don't worry about the very corner yet. The very corner, we'll get to that when we put the other piece along the side here. Okay, it looks like the amount that I squeezed out there is just about right to finish this front edge like this. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes, and this is set up pretty good, so it looks like the front edge is sealed. I'm going to start on one side. I'm going to start on the right side here. And remember, we stopped the tape about here. I suppose you could wrap the tape around, but I didn't want a nice sharp point on here, so I just got the tape cut off straight. And I'm going to push it up against there, and I'm going to push this thing up against the book, up against the wall, nice and tight. Now, like we did before, we're going to put this material down into the crack here. Get it down into the crack. And yeah, I may have to do this sort of left-handed here to try to get it. But we're going to put that material into the corner. Get all the way up into the corner. And then we're going to have to get this material to kind of right up the edge right here. So we're going to put it all the way up and just squeeze it into that crack. And it can over squeeze just a little bit. Okay, everything's ready for us to pour our water in. We've got the dam on all three sides and it's all sealed up on there real nice. I think I've got everything done. The very first thing you want to do is be sure your table is level. Check it this way. Also check to the side this way because you want this to be nice and level. You don't want it really thick on one side and thin on the other. The next thing I strongly suggest is that you cover your table surface somehow. You may think you did a really great job at sealing this thing up, but there may be something you missed. And if this stuff flows down onto your tabletop, you'll never be able to get rid of it. Now in mixing up our water, let's go back to our math here. What we've got is we've got the bank here and we've got 12 inches across and we've got 8 inches of water. So all this is 12 inches by 8 inches. So to figure out the square inches, you're going to have 12 times 8, which is going to be 96 square inches. Okay? So we got 96 square inches that we have to cover. And if you remember from our little thing we had before, for 1 inch by 1 inch, a 1/4 inch thick is 0.14 ounces, right? But we have got 96 of these square inches, right? So we're going to have 96 of these square inches times 0.14 ounces. And if you do the math on that, you'll find out that that ends up to be about 13.4 ounces of material that you need. So for around 13.4 ounces of liquid material, you're going to need about 6.7 ounces of part A, because it's half and half, and you're going to need about 6.7 ounces of part B to do this. So 6.7 ounces of A and 6.7 ounces of B. Now I figured out, as far as the colorant goes, an easy way to do this is for every ounce of A and ounce of B you have, you just put 1 drop of each of the colors in. So if we've got 6.7 ounces of A and 6.7 ounces of B, I'm going to use 6 drops of red, I'm going to use 6 drops of blue, and I'm going to use 6 drops of green. So anytime you're mixing it up a 1/4 inch thick and you want to match what we have, if you have, 2 ounces of A and 2 of B, you're going to use 2 drops of each of these. If you have 12 of A and 12 of B, you'll use 12 drops of these, and your colors will be consistent all the way through. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up our Envirotex Light here. Here's our reusable measuring cup. I'm going to nest a cup inside. And by our calculations, we needed 6.7 ounces of A and 6.7 ounces of B. So that's what I'm going to mix up here. 6.7 of A and 6.7 of B. And you know what? I think I'm probably just going to go with 7 ounces, just to be sure. It's better to have just a touch more. So for this case, I'm going to go ahead and go with 7 ounces of A. And there's my 7 ounces of A, and I'm going to put that to the side. I'll get me another cup here, and I will go ahead and pour in 7 ounces of B. So for my 1/4 inch thick water, I had 7 of A and 7 of B. I'm going to put 7 drops of red, 7 drops of green, and 7 drops of blue into one of these sides before I mix them together. Okay, I've got the colorant mixed into one side. And you know what? I am going to go ahead and take a chance and mix it all up in these smaller cups here. So I'm going to go ahead and add my part B here. Yeah, it looks like I've got enough room in that cup to mix it up. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up, there's still quite a bit of material in this cup. What I'm going to do is mix this up pretty good in this cup and then pour it back into the other cup and mix it up so I can kind of get a better mix of material. Now you notice there's going to be quite a bit of air bubbles in here. And I want to mix this up thoroughly, and I don't want to, they say mix it, I think, for 3 minutes or something. But I'm not going to, I want to mix it up pretty quick, because if this thing starts to set up, because it's such a thick mixture, if it starts to heat up, it's going to set up pretty quickly. I think I've got quite a bit of time to work with it here. Okay, now it's time for the exciting part. I've got this all mixed up and I'm going to go ahead and pour it in. Now I'm going to pour it over top of the fish so the fish will have sort of a kind of a glossy look to them. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour this in, and this stuff will flow pretty good. I'll just go around the side here, pour it over the fish, pour it up around this side of the dock, and I'll go a little bit slow because I want this to have time to run underneath of the dock. I don't want to fill it up too full around the sides. I want to give it time for this stuff to sort of run underneath the dock. Okay, there we go. I think that's just about all of our mix in there. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes so far, and you'll notice most of the bubbles have come to the surface that are going to. What you can do, I'll zoom in here a little bit. If you see some kind of little bubbles on the surface, this is still very liquidy. What you can do is you can just sort of run a paintbrush handle over it. And I don't know if you can see that that pretty much breaks up the bubbles. And just run it back and forth and that'll kind of pop the bubbles. Okay, about 2 hours have gone by and this stuff's starting to thicken up a little bit. There's a few more bubbles that need popped, and if you can see, this stuff is kind of like really thick syrup. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this by, and I'm going to try to pop some of these little bubbles that are on the surface here, just by running the thing through it here. Okay, now I do want to mention something about mixing in Envirotex Light or any of these materials. I poured this one, and at the same time I also did me a little test here so I could try out different kinds of wave effects with different materials. When I mixed these little batches up, they set up about 12 hours later. In other words, 12 hours later, they were rock hard like a piece of glass. This one, which is the same thickness as those, and the same amount of colorant, the same everything, 3 days later, this one is still just a little bit tacky to the touch. Now, it's not going to cause me a problem because I'm going to put something on the top of it to make wave effects, and that will harden nice and hard. But the reason that it's still a little bit tacky, I believe, is because of the way I mixed it. When I did these little tests, I mixed them in a very small cup. There was only about 2 ounces of material, and I stirred it like crazy for a good long time before I poured it in, which caused lots of air bubbles, but all of those air bubbles disappeared when it finally cured. On this one, I mixed it in just, a cup that was really full, and I mixed it up pretty well, but I should have done it for 2 to 3 solid minutes before pouring it. Now, you would think that this stuff would really glue on to the end, but there's something about it that it does not like to grab onto a really slick surface. So all you have to do is simply just kind of pry these off. Just kind of pry them a little bit and just break them off. There it goes, like that. So that one snapped off, and you see it snapped off really clean. There is nothing there, and the side of this is actually kind of, nice and clean. Okay, I am going to go ahead and pop the other 2 sides off. I'm just going to take this, I'm going to pull from the bottom and pull it off. And then I'm going to take from the bottom here, and then just pull this one off. Now, if you'll notice, we do have an edge around it. There is kind of an edge of this stuff that's around it. We will take a knife and trim that off next before we do our water effects. Now I'm going to show a close-up of trimming off this hard edge. What you want to do is get you an X-Acto knife and get a brand new blade in it. Now when you trim this, if yours sets correctly, yours is probably going to be a little bit stiffer than mine. This one here is still not completely set, like I mentioned before, so it's a little rubbery still. When you trim yours, yours will trim off probably much more like a hard piece of plastic. So I'm just trimming this high edge off right here so that I don't, have a high end on this when it actually finally cures all the way. Okay, so far it's been 6 days since I poured this, and it's still a little bit sticky to the touch. So, in my opinion, this will probably never set up hard. But all is not lost. If this happens to you, there are a couple of things you can do and still save this without having to remake the whole thing. The first thing you can do is take your original stuff, whether it was Envirotex Light or whatever brand you used, and mix up a couple ounces of it. Just a couple ounces of it, mix it really well, and pour on a thin coat over top of what you already have. Let it all spread out, and when it hardens hard, then it'll be just like nothing bad ever happened. Now I've went ahead and removed the dam off of here, and I don't want to have to re-put it on and reseal it with epoxy. So instead I'm going to go ahead and texture the surface. Texturing this will provide it with a hard glossy coating that will protect it from dust and dirt and give it a nice texture to it, as well as be able to see through it and be able to see the fish in the water.